Okay, we are ready when you are, Chair Lebrecht.
All right. I'd like to call the session for the Seward Historic Preservation Commission this is our work session for today on the 11th, and would like to get that started. Starting with, you have in your packet, we're going to discuss our HPC 2024 priorities and meeting schedule. A little bit of background for this. So this spreadsheet that you see is something that was developed by Vice Chair Ward a while back with Ms. Bailey, Library Director, and it's now been modified, thank you very much, to be, Ms. Sally, to be hopefully our template for this year. I wanted to also welcome you and tell you we're excited to be working with you as well too. So appreciate that. And also our city manager here as well too. Thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you all for being here. And again, I'm a little jet lagged, so I'm going to need lots of help tonight.
And Chair Lebrecht, if I may, I believe this is Jody's first time at a historic preservation meeting.
Awesome.
So this is Deputy City Clerk Jody Kurtz.
Very much glad to meet you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right. So starting off with the 2024 priorities, to explain where these came about. So essentially at one point in time, we took all the responsibilities that were put before us, not only the purpose of the commission, but also just kind of the mandate of city council, and we took and decided to put these just into a simple format so that we could follow along. This used to be where we had about 6 meetings or so a year. We're now down to 4 meetings a year, so we kind of have to squish things together, but we are responsible for kind of having a format each and every one of our meetings, and then we'll also present our priorities to the council. I have a question though into when the priorities are due to council this year. Do we know that? Because we moved this along because of our 4 meeting schedule and kind of changed the dates a little bit, but I know that we just sat in front of council not that long ago and talked about, we gave a report and then talked about our priorities. So when are our priorities actually due? I would assume that's a joint meeting where probably all the commissions are doing that.
So we've been doing it commission by commission. I know P&Zs are coming to council this upcoming meeting, or did they go at the last meeting?
So P&Z's priorities were just passed last night with their resolution.
So would it be accurate for tonight for us to finalize the 2024 priorities and meeting schedule, and then we're not quite sure when we're going to present though? We need to know that because that would be a separate meeting too.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that one.
But the process has been the commission finalizing, and then we'll be able to put it onto a council agenda. So once we know that yours are finalized, we can move it forward into the council agenda.
Okay, so I'm going to invite thank you for that. I'm going to invite some discussion here as we go along too, because then again, these were based on what we came up with last year. But we may choose to cut some of these things, or we may choose to modify them somehow. So for tonight, for the work session, which has already been set up in this way, we're finalizing our priorities and meeting schedule. So we'll need to look and make sure that we have our schedule set correctly the way we want it to be for next year. In discussing priorities for the City Register's historic nomination. So we do have 6 signs. We physically have 6 signs, and we'd like to talk about those tonight, and then we would vote on those at the meeting following. And you'll see in the packet that there's some suggestions as to what those 6 sites might be for this particular time. Presenting historic properties for added interpretation signs for the historic walking tour. So that's simply going through them and presenting which ones we recommend should be the next ones to be part of the tour. And then a separate discussion will be whether we decide to agree on a CLG grant application, which is due later this month, and what that would include. And what we've discussed, the 2 things that we discussed for that CLG application would be more signs, and the second piece being hiring somebody to help us with writing historical guidelines as well too. So those are the 2 things that we had on for that. And then we were going to talk about public noticing for HP award nominations. That's the HP award that's given once a year, and just simply putting a task of saying that we're asking for that to be noticed for a future award time. Then we'll have a meeting after that. We need to approve August and October 2023 minutes, which are included in the packet. We'll approve HPC priorities, which we'll have discussed in this work session. We'll approve scored local sewer register applications, and there's a procedure that we put in here for scoring those applications. There's approving priority order of walking tour interpretation signs from the work session, assigning commission member to work with city admin to write the annual report, because we will need to write an annual report to present to council as well. Now, one question, does that annual report to council occur at the same time that we talk about our dates and priorities, or are those two separate meetings?
I think it could be the same meeting, two birds.
This is what we've done, this is what we'd like to
Yeah.
do, and then here's...
I think it sounds acceptable from the admin side. What about the clerk? Do you agree?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Yeah.
Good. Discuss any reports that we have that are in our normal meeting, and then discussing Hoban Park and Second Avenue project updates. We have that on there as well too. That is a little unclear to me as to who we had assigned at this point to do Hoban Park and Second Avenue project. You. So that'll be, all right.
I can do those updates on our
Commissioner
road
Benoit.
updates.
Thank you. And then we'll review and update the draft of the Sewer Days proclamation. And we have a copy of that from last year, I think. Discussing updates on the CLG process. I did print out a copy of the CLG request here from the Department of Natural Resources as well too. The deadline for that being January 22nd, 2024, so we'll have to decide whether that is something that is doable. And then this again discussing public noticing for the Historic Preservation Award. So for today's meeting, does everything on here seem reasonable? I think it's all also on the agenda. Okay. That would move us into the next meeting, which we should discuss and make sure that these dates work for everyone. The next meeting would then be on the top of my date I have March 27th. Does that work for everyone's schedule?
It's fine, I know, yes.
Is that? Yep. As far as I know, I have no conflicts.
Is that a Wednesday?
So March 27th is when the HBC material deadline is due. So materials will be needed to be turned over to me.
Got it, okay, I'm
April
sorry.
11th
That's
is
okay.
the meeting.
Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying. See, that's very
Yeah.
helpful to have that on here.
I got
So
you.
April 11th would be the next meeting.
Works for me.
No conflicts, so.
And looking at mine as well. I think that I would be April 11th. Yeah, I see no conflict for me either, so we're okay on that? All right, let's finish the rest of these dates before we talk about the actual material. The next date would be on August 8th. Again, no conflict that I'm aware of. Does that work for everyone?
Everything's in general.
And then we would have November 14th. Does that create any problem for anybody's Thanksgiving plans, for example? Which would be what? Next year would be 20th? So that's a full week before.
Yeah, it should be fine.
We good with that? All right, so then let's go back and just a brief overview to see if there's anything that stands out. At the meeting on April 11th, discussing and approving a plan for National Historic Preservation Month, which would occur in May. So that would be, are we going to work with RBHS? What activities would we do as a commission? Reviewing the HP award nominations and voting on winners, which the HP nominations would have already, the call for nominations would have already gone out following the discussion this meeting. Vote on winners. Discuss Founders Day activities, which is on August 28th. Discussing potential CLG grants upcoming with fall deadlines, because there are 2 CLG grants that come out a year. I don't know that we would do a second one or not. And then the priorities, so that's the business, and the priorities would present the HP award recipient to council to finalize the Founders Day plan and to develop a plan to update 2017. Now, I would strike that because I believe that we discussed a few meetings ago that we were not going to focus this year on updating the 2017 plan. because we felt like what was in it, we were still working the fruit of that plan, which Commissioner Erickson was part of that plan writing. And then 7 o'clock meeting will be to approve, of course, approving minutes, approving HP award recipient, Founder's Day plan activities, et cetera, in aims of the HP award presented by council. Thank you very much for putting on here that July is a hiatus, so we can see that in a work session or meeting. On July 24th, however, HPC material deadline to turn over. And then on August 8th, discussing plan and necessary updates. This again, the 2017 plan, not the case at this point. Brainstorming for 2025 projects, researching structure, sites, promotion, and nominate the Seward local register. Discussing CLG grant applications that will open in October 2024. Reviewing and updating draft of Founder's Day proclamation. And the President and Founder's Day proclamation to Council on August 12, 2024, and completing annual report by the November meeting, which is ahead of this year. That's okay. Thank you for updating all these dates and not knowing what you're doing, like totally catching it all, like no direction. It was really awesome. Thank you very, very, very much for that.
Quick question, it remind me of when the CLG fall grants deadlines are doing.
I think it's in October. We don't know yet because I haven't made the call. For this one, you mean? I'm sorry.
For this
This upcoming one is
yeah.
due on the 22nd, and so
and then the next one would be due later in the fall.
the next one would be due later in the year if we decided
Possibly.
to. Typically, we do maybe one a year because it takes a while. If we're talking about particularly even just doing the signs, it takes a while to do all that research and so on.
Yeah.
And then we could discuss writing some design guidelines as well too as an ongoing project and finding somebody to help.
So
Do
that
that.
one is due January 22nd?
This next one that we're about to talk about, yes.
Okay.
And we'll have to
And then
discuss
the
how
fall
that's
one
going to
would be
happen.
more in
Do you know how
October.
much it's for that can be awarded?
Up to $50,000. They've got $100,000 that's been given to them, and they anticipate, said OHA estimates potentially $100,000 will be available to award to eligible projects. The maximum federal share for any project is $50,000. Doesn't mean we have to ask for the entire $50,000, and we likely would ask for less at this point, because really what we're looking at is getting a few signs. And we've decided we'll not do the magnitude of 26 signs or whatever again. We're just going to do a few at a time. Right?
Yeah.
So it would be substantially less. And then we talked about hiring a writer as well. We'd have to get a bid for that. That may be able to be done or not be able to be done before then. So as far as the actual template, I'm willing to do it. The actual template, I did the first one, is not too bad because we basically can copy what we did last time just on a smaller scale. And I may need some assistance though in getting bids from Corvus Designs and so on.
I've been trying to get that before this meeting, but I have half the information.
We'll get some more of that. So that would only leave us then, if you look on the back, well, it's on my back page, but I printed on front and back, of having an October 30th. HPC materials deadline, okay, wait a minute. So the regular meeting on the previous, which was August 8th, would be to approve the April 24 minutes, approve Founder's Day proclamation, assign commission member for admin to begin annual report, and then Founder's Day activity discussion is a priority on that date. Then we, October 30th, we turn over the HPC material. November 14th, we already talked about, it's the last meeting, no one has a problem with that date as well. So where we would review annual results and priorities, schedule annual report, final review of CLG grant application, if if available, and proposals on UCLG for January 2025. And then we follow up with approval of the minutes, updating CLG grant library. Now that's in here. We have not actually ever put this project together of approving a library or putting a library of grants together. If we want to do that, and let me explain what that is that was an idea that we talked about way back when. So we have the city website, which shows our commission and it shows our priorities and the things that we do. And we had discussed creating a library on there so that folks that were coming and wanting to do some historic preservation would know about the grants with the Department of Natural Resources, not the CLG. They would know about the KMTA grants. They would know about mini grants that are available here from the Community Foundation. They would know about all of the different grants that they are, and it could basically hyperlink and click. It's not the commission doing grants for people. It's giving them a resource so that as they're doing historic preservation, they know where they can go look for money and where they look for expertise. We would, however, be willing to assist and help on a non-official basis, which is explaining to people maybe how you do grants and things, but we would not encumber ourselves necessarily with being involved in anybody's grants. That's not what we're proposing. So and that would be something that would be open to everybody in the public. We do not have that on here anywhere, though. We should probably have it somewhere on the calendar that we're going to spend some work session going through building that library.
Why don't we just change this instead of update to,
Well, because it does take us all the way to next November, so that means that's an awfully long time before we actually do that. So is there a space within all these meetings that we have that we could have a work session and work on a library?
To me, I just think like I picture, here's our page, here's a link that says resources, they click on it, here's a page that says, here's the dates when you can apply for these different grants, here's who it is you would apply for, here's a link, and then they can, and it goes to that place so anybody can see what potentially is coming up and they can go research it themselves. And if that's something we could do simply to start off with, we could probably do that in a page or two and provide lots of good information. And if we had somebody that was willing to do a little research and start putting that together, I don't think we have to do it together in a work session.
Can we have a committee that just does that research? Are we allowed a committee outside of this?
I think I was tasked at our last meeting to look into building this, and what I would like to throw out at this point is duplicating what the public library in Homer has done. They have what's called Grant Station, which is a program that's installed on their computers in the library. That is essentially a grant library online.
That's pretty cool.
That sounds cool.
It's a subscription service. It's an annual, I don't know what the cost is for a public library, but it would be relieve us of having to duplicate the wheel.
But we'd still have to do groundwork to get that set up, right? We'd still have to do that groundwork to get that set up. Plus, we'd have to figure out where the funding comes if it's a subscription service. There is a very small budget that we do have as a commission, so I don't know if it would come out of that or if it'd be a library budget item or how that would work. That's probably a research item to figure out how that would work.
But at least this point, we could get a link to getting that direction.
The
Not
thing
saying
is,
it's-
you have to actually physically go into the library to use the service.
Oh.
You can't go online
Remotely,
to the
okay.
Homer Public Library and access this database, which is essentially what it is. It's a database of grants.
I wonder-
It's like,
I
it's
wonder
a
if
grant
our
library.
library could help us, where you could talk to them and see if they could kind of get some information, figure out, what the cost is and how it'd work, and
Right.
just get some info.
And I'm thinking it's like $200 a year or something for the, but I could be way off on it. But
That
that's-
still seems reasonable, though. Even if people had to go to the library, we're still providing a function, we're still providing a service by directing people, even on our site, by saying, if you'd like to know more, go to the library. Does that present any problems at all from a library perspective?
I do not have enough information to say at this point, but I could definitely pass it along to
Okay,
senior management. at the
sounds good.
library.
And you could find out some more information?
Yeah, I can contact Homer Library and ask them how much they pay for the service and
Okay.
See if
if
they like
it's
it.
available
We can set
for
up.
anyone who happens to have a library card, or if folks from anywhere in Alaska could, this is, 6-8 hour drive to Homer. I tried to find if the library in Anchorage had a similar thing, much shorter drive. but-
It'd be nice to find out if there was an option with whatever the subscription that people can use it online instead of
Yeah,
having
it
to go to the
specifically says
specific
that it's
library.
only available on the library's computers.
That's probably something to do with licensing.
Mhm.
It's probably only licensed to one computer in that location, so, Yeah.
So we probably should strike update CLG grant library for 2025, because that's not something that we need to do. Okay, so other than that, I think that our calendar looks pretty good for
Well,
our
thanks for
HP
doing that research.
priorities. Yeah, this is great. This is fantastic. And it really does help to have the due dates and everything on here. That's very helpful. Pop this right into the computer. All right. Number 2 is discussing nominations for properties to the city's historic register. And I had originally researched, and we put in the packet some information on the selection of properties for the City of Seward Historic Local Register. And to tell you a funny story, we kind of tried to come up with a whole complicated process for how we could do this and how we could score it and how you could submit properties. Again, we're talking the Seward Local Register, so the plaques, you know. And then if you look at our website, the actual city website, you can already see every property that is already on the Seward City Historic Register. And you can see the entire procedure for how you nominate something to the city register. So we were creating something that maybe we didn't need to create, but that's okay. So if you look at the 2017 approved HP plan that we referred to earlier in our city's historic webpage, it was the Seward Register of Historic Places, Commissioner Walker, was established by City Council Ordinance number 9510, and the purpose is to provide public recognition of local cultural resources worthy of preservation. The hopes of by identifying and recognizing properties that are important in Seward's history is to help change the way the community perceives its historic resources and encourage private citizens and public officials to preserve those resources. In addition, the research and documentation that result from completing the local register application provides a valuable historic resource. So there's nothing regulatory about being listed on the Seward Register of Historic Places. Placement of local register does not place any restrictions or limitations on a property. The purpose is and the purpose of this guide is to assist individuals in completing the application form. Now, any resident can nominate people to, or nominate sites to the Seward Register. You'll see later here that we only have 6 plaques right now, and you'll see that we've made some recommendations on which ones should be done, simply because we have not done this for a very long time, and there's some properties that are kind of sticking out there that really should probably have it. In the future, one of the things that we would do is, per our guidelines, is to put a public notice out so that anyone in the public could then nominate a site, a home, whatever it is, to the Seward Local Register. So, per established city code, anyone can nominate a property to the register. We can make our own recommendations, and if we need to actually fill out forms, I printed out a bunch so we can fill out the actual forms if we need to do it that way. And I propose the following system be very simple. So there's some questions to the established application. Not one we came up with, nothing new we did, but the actual application that already exists. And I thought that if the answer was yes, we would give a 2. If it was somewhat, we'd give a 1. And if something did not qualify, we give it a 0. And we simply add that up. Then following our HP work session, we could vote to approve the properties. So to give you an example, if you look at the actual forms, check me pass some out. All right, 10 copies.
Is it page 23?
Yeah, you probably have them in the packet, but I printed extras out. So question 1, for example, well, obviously we put the historic name, sites, and number. Once we get into actual questions about it, on number 6 is where it starts. Can you guys see that in your packet?
Exhibit 3, page 25.
Inspection, page 26. Once we kind of title out what these properties are, the system that I'm proposing, remember, yes is 2, somewhat is 1, no is 0. So if you would say, is the property associated with events that have made a significant contribution to our history? You would score that yes, no, or somewhat. Properties associated with the lives of persons significant in the past. What is the construction of the architecture? Has the property yielded or likely to yield information that is important in Seward's prehistory? So we go down and we write all these things down. If we have any knowledge of significant dates, person, affiliation, architect, or builder, then we would put those things on. So
Plus we'd have this description.
plus we had the description.
So I guess that would be a question, would that also be a ranking, something we've read? This is just describing.
good question.
The condition. And this came up at the last meeting with, I think Chrissy was here and brought up a public comment, like, shouldn't we be giving extra credit to people who have been taking good care of these properties and using them and fixing them up, restoring them, rather than they're just sitting vacant? So it kind of ties into this, but this doesn't look like it is written like you could give it a yes, no, maybe, or somewhat. So, but I think we should consider it.
So shall we try it? So you see current buildings are on the historic walking tours. It said recommendations from me. There's also a recommendation from yourself. They're basically the same. Current buildings that are on the historic walking tour we thought should have priority. If owners have maintained or restored the properties and tried to retain some or all the historic integrity, if they're continuing to operate the properties as a local business or residence, if they have an interesting story to share, and if they're in locations to help educate the public about our history. So, it's the same thing. Yeah, and then basically taking what you wrote, I think we modified it, it's probably a doubling of what we wrote. So for an example, could you, maybe Commissioner Braun, could you maybe pick one of these homes and maybe do an example from the
Okay.
recommendations?
So for
So we could
example-
try this out and see if this, we think this scoring format will work.
Meaning, could we use the
Meaning-
format that I wrote?
Meaning using the application that's already established with the city, the one that we already have.
Okay.
And looking at it, is it a yes, no, or maybe? And starting with, say with Urbox, as being one of the sites, for example.
Okay. You want
First
to-
time we've done this.
Want to try it? So Urbox was one of the ones I recommended because it's the longest continuous family-run business with deep historical roots in the community. And it has recently requested historic walking tour sign. And it's a site that people get to see from both locals and visitors year-round. So if you were to look at Urbox and you said, are they currently on the historic register but do not have a plaque? That would be no, they're not. I don't think they're on the historic register. So that would be a 0.
Now, this is on your criteria or the actual
I'm
criteria
just
that we
looking,
have?
I'm looking at my criteria. Do you want to use?
No, I want to use the city's criteria, and then we can add that as well too, because it's already established, so we don't have to vote on it. So the first question would be, is the property associated with events that have made a significant contribution to our history?
I'd say yes.
Yes? Anybody in disagreement with
So
that?
this line is where we put the 0.
Right, we're doing an
one.
example, we're gonna try the
Yeah.
example, so, yes. So like, I have one right here, so would that be a yes, which would be a 2? Or it's a 1 if it's somewhat, or it's a 0 if not? 2? Anyone in disagreement?
Well, I guess my question is that Urbox has always been in that placement right there.
The original one was there and it burned down. So that building
Okay.
right there, I think, was built like in 1941, just
Okay.
like all those buildings
That's why I was
after the
thinking that
fire.
it had had a fire.
But the
But
family
still-
business was still there, and it was still the same family, they just rebuilt.
Okay. So,
The
yeah,
property.
okay, then I can see it as a 2.
Property has been in the same family. What's on the property is the same business.
Same
The
business.
structure is not the original.
Yeah.
Right,
So is it associated with events that have made a significant contribution to our history?
yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Which means.
Is the property associated with the lives of persons significant in the past?
Yes. Urbach was
Does
very
it
influential in this town. did a lot of
Have
things.
interesting, is it a very interesting construction or architecture, or somewhat, or not at all?
I personally think it's typical of most of those built at that same time, and probably a little more authentic than some of the others on the same side of the street.
If the current structure is 1941, that means it's more than 50 years old. That places it in the yes category,
That's true.
from my perspective.
Well, what is the question again?
It's just, it just says the significance of the construction or architecture. And we've said that we think, yes, it's maybe typical. I mean, it fits the street, it fits the
If
design.
it's more than 50 years old.
And more than 50
Okay.
years old.
Yeah.
Is the property yielded or is it likely to yield information important in Seward's prehistory or history? Commissioner Benoit, you did a lot of research. I know it wasn't one of our walking tour yet, but you did a lot of research on our body.
Is it important?
Is it yielded or is it likely to yield information important to our history?
To our history, yes. Prehistory, no.
Input, thoughts?
So I'm getting a 2, 2, 2, 2.
My initial thought from an admin side is, I don't necessarily see an opportunity when you would ever use somewhat. I feel like a lot of these questions are yes or no, and it would be easy to break it down into that yes or no category. Feel free to disagree with me, but going through that just seems like you're asking yes or no questions and never landing on the somewhat.
I think the somewhat, when we discussed this criteria,
Yeah.
was coming up when we were talking about also looking at the condition of the buildings.
Oh, that makes
Because
sense.
almost all these buildings in town, there's like hardly anything that's pristine,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some that are basically have been so modified, you would not consider them something, you would give them points for that.
Okay.
But there's some, they have tried to keep the character, but they've done remodeling and things like that. So I think a lot of the somewhats will come into
More
that.
towards building area, not historic.
Yeah,
So that's why I
Register
didn't start
criteria.
that question.
I understand totally what you're saying. I think what we were thinking, because kind of what we've picked here are kind of all home runs, but there are a lot of sites in Seward that are in that in-between where you're going to go, yeah, they're historic and there's some real interesting history behind them, but they don't look anything like they originally looked like. And then
Yeah.
we're looking at future applications that would come in and then having to sit and go, do we always say yes to everything or do we, where's the cutoff? I think is what we're trying to figure out. This is kind of exploratory today. But I'm not against having either a 1 or a 0. I mean, it's the same thing, it's the same procedure.
Yeah, my thought is you're specifically asking yes or no questions and injecting a gray area into that, although the questions are yes or no. Gray areas can be fine and fruitful
Well, we
as well,
can-
but.
I have no problem with that. I have no problem with a 1 or a 0
Yeah.
as opposed to a 2. Does anyone else?
I think the advantage of the 0, 1, and 2, it gives you more resolution on a fine line as you add, because it makes you really think, is it,
Open for, this is a discussion.
I think there's probably going to be some properties out there where, like that question about, has the property been associated with events that are significant, or have the people done significant things? In some cases, it's definitely yes. Like, these people are well-known in the community, they've done a lot of things. You find stuff in the history. In other cases, you don't know anything, would be a no. But in some cases, you might have like just a little teeny bit, like, it's kind of important, but it's not gonna rise to the same level as some other things. So I could see maybe that middle of the road happening in something like that. I'm just thinking about all the different stories I've learned about from all these different signs, and I can't say they're all on the same level. of
No, I mean, I
significance like
look
that.
at the Jesse Lee home, you know, and now that it's no longer there, but it's still significant, it's still prehistory, it still has a lot. I mean, we can't just completely discard like, bam, it's not there anymore. There's gotta be something, but you know, again, what rises to the top and what doesn't and stuff, and it falls in different categories, because there is no construction, and who knows what's gonna be there? You know, and where do we place the significance to at least say this was here? So, you know, so there's gonna be, I think there's gonna be conversations, and I do like the input of saying, you know, sometimes it's gonna see what's gonna rise to the top first, to where we have to put our energy in, but we can readdress other things as time goes on, so that's just my input. I don't know, Commissioner Walker? Any thoughts?
I think the yes, no, maybe, but the maybe is probably most of it. You know, it's great, in fact.
Well, this is the initial screen, right?
Yeah, we're testing the
So-
process too.
What I mean is that this is the first approach for anyone. So making it simpler, and then as they engage the process further, then refine it. In other words, bring in this, maybe thing at a later stage. But at the front end, just, yes or no. Does it fit this criteria or relate to this or not? And then once that's been established, then break it down into the finer.
I wonder if there would be, instead of a maybe, and maybe that could be, I don't know, because I'm just thinking of like the person who's submitting this from the public. We're asking them all about this history. I mean, believe me, plenty of people in this town are like, I have no idea whatsoever about the history of this house, the family, anything. And so they probably would have a hard time to being able to say yes or even no, and really have no be the correct answer because they just don't know. So maybe I don't know would be a better answer than somewhat.
I don't know. Okay.
Well,
As far as, yeah, for the public, and keeping it simple.
Let's finish this one because this is just going to be a case study, right? So we're going to describe, because really we're going to be able to describe. So the property in question is Urbox. We'll put the street number, legal description, all that later. The owner of the property is still, can I write this down? Is still the Urbach family, correct? It's a building. And then we get into the criteria consideration. Is it owned by a religious institution to use for religious purposes? No. Was it removed from its original location? No. Is it a birthplace or a grave? No. Is it a cemetery? No.
No.
Is it a reconstructed building, object, or structure?
Yes. Apparently, right? Or how do we consider that?
I don't know if I would call it reconstructor, because that sounds like you had to have something you built onto. I think it was like,
No,
I
that's,
think it was a new building that was built.
reconstructed means new building.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah, renovated means
So we're saying no.
Altered.
So what you're talking about is the Hotel Seward. Hotel Seward is something that's been rebuilt over the years, and there's bits and pieces of it that are original and some pieces that are not.
So that would be renovated, but you were thinking like a Furbox was totally built.
Yeah,
from
if it
scratch
burned to
would
the
be-
ground
would be
and
reconstructed.
something was built in its place, that's reconstructed, not
Okay.
renovated.
So
But if
Urbox
something
is,
has been altered, like res art,
so Urbox is all original.
So it would be
is it?
reconstructed.
No, I thought
No, or
it,
did
the
it burn
original
down?
building burnt down.
Okay, so that's
and-
reconstructed.
The building that's there now was a reconstruction of the original one.
Got it. Is it a commemorative property? No. Is it less than 50 years of age? No.
No.
Are there any significant dates? We don't know that. That would be something we would do. Normally what would happen also is either we would take the time to do more research on it, or a member of the public submitting this would do more research on this as well too. Significant person is Dorothy Urbach, correct?
Leon Urbach, I would say also, is the one that comes to mind. For this property is on our walking tour, just does not have a sign
I
currently.
do not know whether it's, well, cultural affiliation would be something if it was like a tribal thing or something, right? So like even with Jesse Lee Home, there would have been a cultural affiliation. The architect or builder, unknown.
I don't know that.
And then if we were just to put a little narrative statement of significance, what's the historical significance of Urbach?
I would say you could probably just say
That would be
it's
the
the
longest.
longest continuous family-run business in town.
So if I was the one that was submitted this, I would have submitted Urbach. Is it called Urbach or Urbach General Store? I can't remember what it's called, what the actual name is.
Urbox Clothier.
Urbach Clothier?
Clothier.
French name. So if I was the one that would have done this, I would have said it's Urbox Clothier, and I would put down the street number, legal description, and so on. The Urbach family is the current owners. We'd have telephone and all that. The category of the properties that it's a building, describing it and its significance would be that we were 8 for 8 or 4 for 4, however you would say it. The properties associated with events that have made significant contribution in our history. The properties associated with the lives of persons significant in the past. The construction and architecture is significant. It's typical of the time, and it's more than 50 years old. The property has yielded information important in Seward's history. It is also a reconstructed building which had originally been burnt and rebuilt. And the significant persons are Leon and Dorothy Urbach with an unknown architecture builder. It is the longest continuous family-run business in town. So under all those things, would we as a commission then suggest that it be considered to be on the Seward Register of Historic Places and be awarded a plaque?
I would.
Any nays? Okay, we have to actually vote like in the actual meeting afterwards, correct?
I would qualify my yay.
You qualify.
I would rather see it folded into an historic district rather than singled out. Because it's a reconstructed building.
A historic district is very complicated.
I understand that. But,
Way beyond a plaque.
but right next door, well, almost next door is what's now the Flamingo. That is an original structure, is it not?
Well, it has to be older than 1941. I actually think it's newer than Urbach's, but I'm not sure. Never looked into it.
But then that, again, that brings us to the district side of it, because a lot of these buildings, as you've said, have been modified to the extent that, that brings into question their historic nature. But as a part of the district, being a business or an entity outside of just the structure itself is itself significant.
I'm just thinking like the idea of a district, that whole side of the street, they would all fall into the same kind of thing. But then you're kind of, if you're lumping them into a category like they all become a district, then you're kind of losing the individual history of what made each one of those buildings or people or histories important, and they would be different.
I feel the interesting part of this conversation is I feel that we're placing much more on the family history and history than it is of the actual, location and the design of the building. So that's the thing is an interesting line of, for our historical setting as, which are we promoting, or do we promote both? Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. If I may, maybe a little clarification. So it says when you're filling out this actual application, if you're a citizen doing this, or anyone doing this, it says to read the qualifications first. And the qualifications said the Seward Register of Historic Places was established in order to provide for public recognition of local cultural resources worthy of preservation. So it doesn't even have to be a building. It can be anything.
It is the preservation of the history.
Anything.
Okay.
That has historical whatever it is. It could be a site. I mean, honestly, you could have a plaque on the Jesse Lee home site without the Jesse Lee home even there, because you're recognizing that culturally, not only is there a walking tour, but also people would see a plaque that says this. When you go to the city's website, there's a list of all of the places that are important to the city's history, and that would say that Urbach is important to the city's history, hence why it has the little brass plaque.
So this is why we would vote.
This is why we would vote.
Okay.
So, and from what I understand, and so it says, and it's to is to change the community's, how it perceives its historic resources and encourage private citizens and public officials to preserve those resources. For whatever that's worth. Since there's nothing regulatory about being listed on Seward Register of Historic Places, placement of local register doesn't place any restrictions or limitations or anything. It's just saying we think it has significance to our history.
Okay.
And we also said here, we should make our own recommendations as well, or maybe we should say we can, if we want to. And so if we're thinking that what's in here now is more general or broad than we want, last time we had a meeting, we were discussing, should we have some more specific recommendations for how we pick these things?
Yep.
All things being created equal, which is kind of like, in the stuff that I recommended, I had some bullet points and I'm like, these are the reasons I picked these, which are kind of like a little more specific things beyond what was in here.
Good.
I just want to make sure that, like, you know, when we vote, we have all these numbers come up to the top, and it's like, yeah, but we really think that this, Jesse Lee Home is very significant, but it doesn't rise all the way to the top, is what I'm saying. So I want to be mindful of, there's going to be the maybes.
This might help a little bit too, to your point. So under the application qualification 2, it's at the very beginning of it, right on the site, category of properties can be a building, which could be used to refer to historically and functionally related units, such as a courthouse or jail or a house and a barn. But it can also be a site. A site's a location of a significant event. So again, that brings back Jesse Lee Home. It doesn't even have to have the building on it. It even says examples include hunting and fishing sites, ceremonial sites, ruins of historic buildings and structures, trails, areas of land, cemeteries. Okay, and then so it can be a building, a site, or it can be a structure for something other than creating human shelter, such as a bridge, a tunnel, a gold dredge, a railroad grade, roadways, paths, etc. And then it could be an object. I don't know what that would be. To distinguish from building and structures could be a sculpture, a monument, a boundary marker, a statuary or fountain, or if we had a district, it could be a district that possesses a significant concentration, linkage, or continuity of sites or buildings. So these are all things that are, well, that would be like the old red light district that's down in, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know that we'd want to put a sign from the city on there, but that's an example of something that could be.
Well, they've already said that they are willing to talk to them or someone on the list that we could put a sign there if we want to.
We'll do that maybe another meeting, after your chair.
So another.
I mean, it's one of those things that people are very interested in.
They're very interested.
Yes, Commissioner.
Another track here is that in favor of thinking of Urbux as part of a district is that otherwise we're putting a sign on every single building you walk and you gotta read a new sign. I'm just wondering where does that end?
Well, we're supposed to do this every year as part of our actual mandate. So we're supposed to every single year. It doesn't say how many. It could be 1 a year, it could be 2 a year. We're thinking about 6 because I know I've been on the commission for over 5 years and we haven't done one that I'm aware of. So we've got 6 signs that we can put out. So we're looking at doing a batch of them this time, but we could easily legislate and say we're going to do 2 a year. And then we keep that under as well too. So that's something else.
You're talking about plaques?
Plaques, we're not talking walking tour.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, this says in here, in part of the, again, back to the description, if approved, may the property be placed on the historic walking tour. This does not mean the property be open to the community and tourists. It simply means the property's physical description and statement of significance is included in the walking tour. But that does not mean, like, if Urbux is like, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a little sign that says we're on the register and be on the website that says this is a historic place that's important to the city of Seward. Doesn't mean they have to let anybody in, doesn't mean that it can even be on a house, on a private house. It doesn't mean it's open to the public, it does not mean it has to be on a walking tour.
Right.
It's just identified as being a place of history. So, and if I understand properly the way this procedure works, today we're talking about it, and then when we get to our actual regular meeting, we'll vote and approve what we've talked about, right? So we're not actually voting now, though you can bring it again to the public that we just said now. Are we good with that one example? And do we want to walk through the other 4 or 5 examples that we have?
Is there an example that includes a maybe?
Well, I don't know, but are we good with our box? Do we want to try one more? I've got more forms.
I don't know, like when I made these, I was using my own criteria that I put in. I actually didn't even know that the subline was there, so I wasn't using it at all. Plus, we didn't have the scoring anyway.
Do we want to try another one? What do you think?
One that may be in the gray area would be that, Reese brought this up a couple months ago, that motel across from Highliner.
The Tides Inn. The Tides Inn.
Yeah, yeah, that goes back to World War II. I think it was built in 41.
And it has a historic walking tour sign.
Okay,
But I didn't propose that one for a plaque.
yeah.
But some of the other ones.
But it's been, over the last couple of years, it's really been cleaned up. It's looking good.
To give you an idea of the current Register Historic Places, we have Seward Commercial Company, Hoban Park, Cameron House, Holland House, Stewart House, this is page 29, Ray Building, Johnston Building, Methodist and Lutheran Church, Two Lakes Park, Woodlawn Cemetery, Seward Light and Power, Heidi Stockco House are the ones that I see on here. Now the interesting thing is that these were nominated from 1998 to 2016, and there wasn't always a nomination every year. There were 2 in 98, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in 99, 1 in 2003, 1 in 10, and then it looks like we did do one in 2017.
And that Stockco
That's
house
it.
is no longer there.
So it's been inconsistent. So to your point, yeah, we're playing a little catch up today. It doesn't mean we necessarily even nominate anybody in a year, but it is for us to consider as part of our work. So I have a blank form here if anyone is interested in continuing on with any of the others that were suggested on the list. Do you want to throw another one out? We've got some time.
Well, I think the Blaine House should have one. It's at the top of the list.
You could.
That would be a pretty easy one.
Full disclosure on the Blaine House. Blaine House is already on, should already be on the register, but they just don't have a sign.
Is it on there?
It's not on there, but I know that they're on the register somewhere.
They're on the National Register, but are they on the Seward Register?
They're on the Seward Register because Marley, who is the owner of the house, gave the sign back because she didn't like all the work that she had done to it to change it and felt that it had lost some of its historic character. And I explained to her that the significance of the house is why a plaque is awarded, because it was, when the Blaine brothers came here, that was a house that was originally built way back when. So Frank and John Blaine, and that history is very rich there. So I explained to her that she should probably have a sign, but she gave hers back, I guess, at one point in time. And another thing for us to consider as we go through this, because some of us own historic houses, is whether there's any conflict of interest in that too. And I'll tell you that on Blaine House, I'm involved in helping her restore that home, so I have a partnership with her. It's not a financial partnership at this point, but may eventually be. So I'm open and agnostic to whether we pick Blaine House or not, because I have an interest in it. Just like I have the Cable House, so I wouldn't put Cable House forth as something. I already have one anyways. But as we think about that, some of us own historic homes or have some stakes in it. So it doesn't necessarily have to be Blaine. We can pick another one.
I think one other criteria we ought to use is whether the place is owner occupied.
What is it?
Like Dorothy.
What is that?
Well, I'm trying, I don't have the right words for it, but where it's in service, like Dorothy's place, it's been, it's been service, in the same service, as opposed to a rental or an empty site.
Well, think about Brown and Hawkins as one of our most historic buildings. It is
Yeah.
in use as business, but the owner does not live there. Then you would kick them off the list, which I don't think we probably
No.
do.
But But if we're, I'm just saying in terms of priority, I would think it's something that's owner occupied or as opposed to a rental or an empty site.
Remember, it can be a house, a site, a structure, an object. All you're saying is that whatever the object, the house, the site, or whatever is of historical significance to Seward, and so it should forever be memorialized on paper, on our website, on people walking by and seeing the little plaque. It's on the Seward local register. It will always be, no matter like who the owner is. It may be 50 years from now that it's a different owner. You just have to decide whether you think it has historical local significance. That's really the only thing that seems to be the most important. Because again, does the Jesse Lee site have historical significance? I would argue that it does. Yet, we know all the things that happened with Jesse Lee. So that's all we're doing is taking and looking and saying, what do we want to memorialize and what do we want to influence as the commission to say that this is something that's worthy of preserving and worthy of being talked about.
I think the Blaine House does.
Okay. Thoughts?
The list we have here is what is currently.
That's the most recent list that our clerk was able to locate, is that correct?
And
But if you look at the actual website, because I don't have it in front of me or I don't have a computer, you might look on there, because I'm pretty sure there's some other sites too that are on there. And each one of these you see is always enacted by an HP resolution, which then is approved by City Council. So
And-
once we make these recommendations, then there's got a resolution is written for each one, and then it goes before City Council, and then City Council goes, yeah, we agree.
Are we restricted to any particular history? And let me phrase that another way. I noticed there are no native sites on our list. Unless I could be mistaken.
Anyone can nominate, so that's part of the deal, even tonight. If you can think of a particular site.
Haven't seen any restrictions in place that would preclude that. It said sites was one of the things that could be added, right? I'm not sure exactly what you mean
Yeah,
by
site.
site when you said that.
Not that I would want that in with the red light district, but I mean.
Yeah, that's a site.
I don't have a problem with red light district, I just didn't necessarily want it on my watch.
I don't know, I mean, there's books about it. They were very strong businesswomen.
I'm not against.
Yeah, no, it's
Just saying, I'm not gonna be the one
fascinating
proposing.
history that people care about. And it's on other walking tours for Seward that other people have done.
Right. And I mean, I'd
How
be
long is
interested
the
in the, I mean,
Katuchek?
after the earthquake and the mayor burning everything down and all the,
And there's
story
space
that goes
next
on
to
with
time.
that.
Yes.
I'm just wondering how long the Katucheks have been in that property next to the Titans.
I don't know, I haven't done any research on this building.
So are we gonna run through this again?
Yeah,
or-
and we want to run through, do we want to pick a site, whatever that site is, and run through this with the thought that we might get at least just a couple of them done tonight? You don't have to do 6. But it might be nice to do more than just the one that we've done so far. What are the other ones that you had recommended?
I had,
Marianne?
on the list, I had Blaine House, Urbox, the McMullen Building.
It's a good one.
At Blaine House, they have asked to do a historic walking tour sign in the future. McMullen already has a sign, and it's an operating business. Standard Oil Manager's House, that is an operating bed and breakfast. It has a sign, it's on the walking tour. Alaska's Point of View Quonset Hut is a business. It has a sign, it's on the walking tour. The Brownell House it's on the walking tour, it has a sign, it's an operating bed and breakfast. And then the Manthe House, that's Sue Ward's house, it has been, restored, it's on the walking tour, it has a sign. And then I put St. Peter's Rectory just because it seems like they are already on that list, but they don't have a plaque. For Todd said they have a blank plaque in a drawer someplace, but it's never been engraved, so there's that plaque that should be in the process, I think, of getting the other ones done. It should be engraved so they can put that one up.
Are they on the register though? Because right now
Yes,
we're
they're
not,
on the register.
so they're already on the register. So that's just a question of maybe just making decisions to allocate one of the plaques that we have in our.
They already have a plaque.
No, but
They
we have one
a
that's,
blank
we have one that's engraved already, don't we? No, because it doesn't have the name on it.
It seems like somebody way back when, they got now that they were on the register, they were given a blank plaque and then nothing happened.
But I can't even remember, do we have an example of the plaques? I knew you brought one down, because I don't think like mine has a specific name on it. It just has that it's part of the Seward local register. It doesn't have a name on it or anything.
Yeah, I don't think so unless there's a spot for it to be like personalized.
I don't think so.
Because some of those out there, like, at
It's not
Resurrect Our
engraved.
Coffee House, there's a plaque there, but it is so messed up you can't hardly read it anymore, but it had something like the Lutheran Church and had some dates.
Do we have access to those?
Do you know where
See,
those
clerk?
plaques
So
were?
it sounds like maybe there've been
Did you ever see
different
those?
ones.
You brought one down before,
Yeah.
I know.
Can you put a
I
black?
think if I remember if I gave those over to Bailey or if I just took them back to our office. But
Okay.
I can go check.
Yeah, I don't believe that they have anything on them. It just says Seward City Local Register. I mean, I have one on my front door. So I don't know what that blank one is that you have, but that would simply be a question of,
It just was never installed, I guess.
so are there any other, we do have a couple other pieces of business that we have to do. We'll have to talk about the historic properties that we want to look for consideration for the walking tour. And then we will need to do as item number 4 during this work session, proposal and agreement of a CLG grant application. And if we're sticking to our time of, we should be starting our next meeting at 7 o'clock, is that correct?
Yes.
So
Can we put Brian Hawkins with a sign?
with
They already
a
have one.
walking tour sign, they
No, I
have,
don't
with a,
mean-
do they have a,
Sign
They're on the
the-
register, I thought, and I believe they already have a sign out there, or a plaque. It seems like there is, I believe there's a plaque.
I would have to do a physical look, and again, this could be done at a future meeting, but I would have to take a physical look, because I don't know if they have one or not.
You know, I actually do know. Let's see, maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I'm missing it.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
How many are on the actual register right now, do you know?
If you look at this particular sheet, it looks like somewhere, where is it? It's, this actual sheet suggests that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, but I think that there's more than that.
There's two
Personally.
pages, there's 24, and Brown and Hawkins is on there.
Are you talking about walking tour, or are you talking about this?
I'm talking about the his.
Where do you get 24?
There's 2 pages.
Oh, I'm missing that page. Okay, so there's 24, let me see what you got. So there's 24 total ones. So the other ones that I didn't mention was Seward Commercial Company, Hoban Park, Cameron House, Holland House, Stewart House, yeah, Ray Building, Johnston Building, Methodist Lutheran Church, Two Lakes Park, Woodland Cemetery, Seward, I did read
Oh,
those.
you read that.
Those are the ones, okay, so there's different pages. City Council, Diversion Tunnel at Lowell Creek, Alaska Central Railway Tunnel, Swetman House, Seba Lane House was given one in 1995. So in this particular case, we're just talking about the fact that they gave theirs back. So you're not talking about awarding anything, you're talking about deciding, and you are correct. There is a blank place on here, and I would assume that would be for the year. And we would get these engraved with the year that it was awarded.
The one like I've seen at Resident Coffee House is not a big one like that. It's more of a small square one. So I wonder if there's been some different versions of these.
So Belaine House is already on it, St. Peter's is already on it. So that was awarded in 1995. The government cable.
Yeah, there is one on the church itself.
We're
But
talking
then there's
about,
another one in a file cabinet that
Okay.
I assume is for
because it's the
rectory.
church and the rectory, and so they have 2. plaques. One is on the church, one is in a drawer,
There
I
you go.
guess, for the record.
The Government Cable House was awarded in 95, it's on our front door. Van Gilder Hotel has been awarded. Sewer Depot has been awarded. Brown and Hawkins was awarded in 1995. They were awarded a plaque. And then Iditarod Trail and the Jesse Lee Home. Don't know where that is, if that exists, was destroyed in 2021, so I don't know if there's anything existing for that. So. Okay. So question is, of any of those not mentioned, is there any others that are not currently on that list that we'd want to vote on tonight? From that list that you suggested?
That list I suggested was based on kind of this discussion we had last meeting and the criteria that I wrote down, and I thought about that because that's what I had thought of, and also what people brought up as being important. So just using that criteria, and knowing I thought we only had 5 to give out, I came up with, I think, 7 of them, thinking that we could have something to think about. Maybe you guys would also have some, and we could pick the top ones and go from there.
So the question is, again, of any of those that we just mentioned, Manthe House, Brownell House, is that correct?
There's a Blaine House, Urbox, McMullen Building, Standard Oil Manager House, Alaska's Point of View Quonset Hut, Brownell House, Manthe House, and that's it. The St. Peter's Rectory, I feel like we don't have to vote on that. That's already been decided. They just need
Okay.
to.
Same thing with the lane, has already been awarded, it's just a matter of whether you want to allocate one of those plaques or not to go back that way.
Right.
So, do we want to talk real quickly? Do we want to maybe put the Quonset hut up? We brought it up a lot of times. Is that something that's worth discussing? Maybe that's another one we can do tonight?
Sure.
Quonset hut? Okay with everyone?
Is that the one that's next to the old dog pound?
Yes, and they have she has a sign.
The owner of the property is Deborah Halfmeister, is that right?
Great.
It's a building or a structure? Good question. Is that a building or a structure? It's more of a structure, isn't it? Quonset hut?
You know, it might be a structure because those were put up for the military. I don't know if they considered them buildings like anything permanent. I think they were always supposed to be impermanent, like housing for groups of stuff.
I mean, in its
Structure.
original state, but
The term structure is used to distinguish from buildings as functional construction is made usually for purposes other than creating human shelter. Was it ever made to be a human shelter to begin with?
Yes.
Yes?
Definitely is.
Okay.
I lived in one, I thought.
Sorry.
So it is a building. The description of it, somebody describe for me the historic and current condition of the property.
It is well preserved, like there's a lot of Quonset huts, well, not a lot in town, some of them will look really bad. And if this one is one of the few that looks nice because it has been taken care of and it's being used as a bed and breakfast, and so they have over time kept it up. What I wrote about it, it's a well-preserved relic with a fascinating history. It's well-maintained and a unique remnant of the war with a rich history. It's on the walking tour. And one of the things that was kind of unique about that is that in the history, I don't know if this is true, I can never prove this, but they supposedly used to house some of the stars that the military would bring in to entertain the troops, and supposedly Lauren Bacall stayed there at one point. So that was like the big story about that place.
Awesome. Let's talk about scoring kind of things. Is the property associated with events that made significant contribution to our history?
It's a remnant of the war.
So that's a yes?
It made a big
Yes.
contribution to our history.
It's not a maybe, yes. Is the property associated with the lives of persons significant in the past? That's a good question, because other than Lauren Bacall, can you really tie anything to it?
I can't think of anything that I found as far as a person that stayed there or ever lived there after the war, anything that would have been significant. So I'd say no.
I would disagree.
Really? Who?
Yeah, well, if Lauren Bacall stayed there, I mean, that's like, President Lincoln slept here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people get plaques for that.
Okay.
It just says associated with lives of persons significant, not just to Seward.
Right. Okay, Lauren Bacall. Yes, yes.
Was she-
Would that be a good opportunity for
President
us to
Harding
somewhat?
was in town.
I think
at
that's a
one point,
somewhat.
right?
We finally landed on a somewhat, I think.
I'll start advocating for this.
Because it's
somewhat.
undetermined as well too, it's not like there's a picture of her in it.
That's the question I was gonna ask.
Is there proof?
Yeah. Is
I
there?
tried my best, this is the history I
Is
was
there a-
given.
yeah, something?
I tried my best to prove it, and I could never prove
My
it.
grandmother insists Houdini stayed at her house in Toledo once.
Okay, so.
But no one saw him.
No picture.
Okay, is the construction or architecture of a, there's been an interesting construction and
I
architecture
was gonna
too.
ask if it was confirmed if she had stayed
Yeah.
there.
Okay, fair.
The property is yielded or is likely to yield information important to Seward's history?
Yes.
Yeah, it came from
Yes.
Fort Raymond, didn't it?
They were all
No,
over to.
I don't think, no, it was not moved from any place, it was actually built there. There used to be
All
tons of
over.
those Quonset huts all over down
I
there.
used to live in one when we first came.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Awesome.
And now there's only a couple.
So it's important in our history, there's very few left.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so, basically if you were to score that, it's a 7 of a possible 8. Is it owned by a religious institution? No. Was it removed from its original location? It's always been there.
I don't think so, I think it's in its original.
Is it a birthplace or a grave or cemetery? No. Is it a reconstructed building, object, or structure? No. Is it a commemorative property? No. Is it less than 50 years of age? No. Okay. Any significant dates? We say it's from World War II, we think?
Yes.
Is there a significant person, Lauren McCall? Is there any cultural affiliation? There is not. The architect, U.S. builder is probably the U.S. Army, I would guess. And we already talked about its significance. So are we going to put this for consideration for our actual meeting to award the Quonset hut? Yes, during our regular meeting?
Yes.
Do we want to pick anything else? Maybe one of the native sites or anything? Does that require more consideration?
Like what? What site?
I don't know, you had others.
Oh, well, the other sites, how about Standard Oil Manager's House? It's a beautiful building, very nicely maintained. I have been in there and seen that.
That's the one at Adam and Blaine.
That's called the Adams Street B&B.
It's right on the, almost on the water, it's across the way it
Right.
goes, that, yeah.
So back in the day, there used to be the Standard Oil, big giant tanks.
Yeah.
And that's where the manager lived in that house until the earthquake
1964.
blew it all up. The house is still there, but, yeah.
Okay. Do we know who the owner of that property is? Commissioner Bernal?
I'm not, that I can remember.
If you don't, my old neighbor in Midtown in Anchorage, it's one of her friends, so
Yeah.
that owns
I mean,
it.
I've talked to him, I should know. off the top
Yeah. It's
of my head,
okay, but I
don't
mean, if we
remember.
need a name or something.
Yeah, we'll
we
figure it
need to
out.
revisit
We'll do
it,
something
so,
more official.
yeah.
We can fully fill these out.
Can't have Ms.
Do
LeBeau.
we have the address? I can look it up on Parcel Viewer.
Yeah, the
real quick.
parcel viewer is great.
Yeah.
It would be, if we have a walking tour map around here somewhere, the address would be on that.
We can fill these
I
out
don't
in more
think-
details too, but it's a building, right? Obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's the description of it and the condition of it?
I would say it's a bed and breakfast. Let's see, the condition I would say is really good. It's restored. I can't tell you like how pristine it is, but from what I've seen, they've done a very nice job. It seems very in good shape. And it still looks pretty historically. Have you been in there?
I haven't been inside, but, I know the people and they're pretty high base, so
They
I'm
gave
sure
you a
it's
tour
well
once.
maintained.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not sure that they're gonna run a bed and breakfast out of it anymore, so they can just keep it for themselves.
Is it associated with events that have made a significant contribution to our history?
Yes.
My friends.
How so?
I've met them.
Because that's where the Standard Oil Company had their tanks, and that's where their manager lived, and everything was right there. And that was a big deal in our town. as far as.
That's probably a
industry.
one.
It's
Yeah,
what?
It's kind of a maybe.
Standard Oil?
This B&B right here. Question is, it's about our history.
Yeah, that's what it's Standard
No, but it's
Oil
whether
and
it's,
Naturally.
if you were to describe Seward, just like when you're doing the walking tour or whatever, what buildings, sites, or objects are of significance? I mean, you could talk about, that's like saying, for example, Dairy Hill. It's not a Dairy Hill anymore there, right? But that's a significant thing that you'd want to point out as being part of our history. So does that building have significance to our history? The fact it's on the walking tour suggests that, because there's a whole story of it.
I mean, I think that was historically important, Standard Oil, and what they brought to our town kind of put us on the map in a lot of ways.
You guys decide. Just put it down.
It is owned by a Donald
Donald
Clary
Clary.
Jr. Beat you to it, Chris.
I had it on the
Thank
screen.
you.
Oh. Yeah,
That's the person you were thinking of?
yeah, that sounds right.
Isn't Don Clary associated with ABT?
That was gonna be my moment.
It is your moment.
Isn't Don Clary associated with ABT?
I think he used to be in the old school, but,
So is the
might
property,
be.
is the property associated with the lives of persons significant in the past?
Yes, I think the guy, the man, I forget his name now, the Standard Oil manager that lived in that house was well-known to pretty much everyone in this town. And some of the books that are out there, like Paul Steiner's book mentioned him, talk about how everybody really liked him. So his family was influential in town.
Does the construction or architecture have anything significant about it?
I believe it.
Original 1928 structure. isn't
Yeah, I
it?
think it's original. It looks like it might have been a Stecco Johnson, but I can't remember offhand if it actually was, or if we have that on the sign. It's kind of a unique structure, I think.
Has it yielded, or is it likely to yield information important in Seward's prehistory or history?
It has yielded important information historically, not prehistorically.
Is it owned by a religious institution? No. Is it removed from its original location? No. Is it a birthplace or a grave? No. Is it a cemetery? No. Is it a reconstructed building, object or structure?
No,
No,
that's the
it's
origin.
renovated.
Commemorative property? No. Is it less 50 years of age? No. His significant date is what?
I don't
Building
know.
1928.
Any significant people? Yes. The Standard Oil manager's house. Any cultural affiliation? No. We don't know who the architect or the builder is.
Yes, Judy, Besh, and Don Clary
Oh.
are the people who own the house. You did great.
All right.
There's your moment.
All right. And we've talked about the significance. We already wrote all that up. So, I mean, if you want to recap this one, the Standard Oil Manager's House, which is now the Adams Street B&B, is owned by Donald Clary Jr. and Judy Besh. It is a building. It is currently a bed and breakfast, very well restored, still period and historically accurate. Currently run as Adams Street B&B. It is associated with events that have made significant contribution to history. It's a Standard Oil Manager's home, also where the tanks were that were important to the city. Property is associated with lives of people significant in the past, yes. It has interesting construction and architecture, original from 1928. It does yield information important in Seward's history, which has been documented on the walking tour. We think it was built in 1928, and the significant person is Standard Oil Manager. Is everyone in agreement with that particular property? As our last one tonight, receiving a plaque.
Sure we don't have time to do any more?
We still have other business to do unless we want to defer that business. We can do this on a future meeting. We don't have to do them all tonight. Okay?
So are those the only two we're voting on this evening?
There's three.
I thought that was the third one.
Okay, there is three. We don't have to have an application.
There is three. I'll pull that one together afterwards, so.
Okay.
And then the only other business you can do at a future time, but I'll let you guys decide, is whether we should give Belaine House back one since they're missing one or not.
I think they're like the most important house we have.
So if you'd like that discussion on that or whatever.
Unless they're gonna be like, no, I'm not putting it up, but
I didn't hear
if they
the
would,
question.
it'd be a good place to have.
Any thoughts on that?
I mean, is this something that is in progress in some ways where, I mean, I'm totally for giving back the plaque, but it's just like, do we want to wait to give the plaque when it's like,
We can.
oh, here we go, or,
Do something more official in the future and see what their intent is,
Yeah.
would be fine. I agree with that. All right, good. So on our on the rest of our packet was to discuss, to present historic properties for added interpretive sign consideration. That all ties into our CLG grant application, which I'm going to skip to number 4 and say the proposal and agreement on CLG grant application to the State Historic Preservation Office. Again, the Office of History and Archaeology is accepting grant applications for certified local government grants for a 60-40 HPF matching grant project. The CLG grant program provides up to 60% financial assistance with a 40% CLG match for the cost of historic preservation project. It can be for a survey, for an inventory, for a National Register nomination, historic preservation planning, public preservation education, pre-development or development, and they do definitely consider our walking tour to be of significant importance, and I think that they would be eager for us to continue adding signs to the walking tour. We currently have how many signs, Commissioner Benoit? 26 signs. That took, I was part of that project with you, and that took many, literally hundreds, I think thousands of hours to complete that project. It's very time consuming. I think we proposed doing a small amount. Also, there's a pretty good cost that's associated with those 26 signs. We used every bit, basically, of that money. And I think we talked about doing somewhere between 5 and 10 at most. I'm thinking more like 5. Do you have something in mind?
Well,
What did you propose?
Okay, so what I did was, I looked back at our criteria of how we rank stuff. I looked at what we did the last time, where the funding line ended, and who was still left that we had already voted on that didn't make the cut because we didn't have enough money. Which was, there was 2 things left. It was Al Plan's house, but that's been sold, so I kind of dropped that off because I don't know what the new people. And then yours was the next one, so yours kind of went to the top.
okay.
Of the list.
But I don't have much, I don't have hardly any history on it other than.
On most of these places before,
Yeah.
they had nothing.
Okay.
So we were starting from
I
scratch.
mean,
So that doesn't matter.
We're totally fine with that.
So then what I did was I looked at, okay, you know, what do we have left over, which was basically you. And then and we had said before that we expected that all interested property owners would be included in the tour, but only a limited would get a sign. And we would expect that if in the future we requested a second grant, that all the interested people could potentially get a sign. Of course, they have to go through a ranking process. And so then what I did was I looked at, I had a list going of all people who had expressed interest before or since and said, oh, because after they saw these signs, like, I would like a sign, no, I would like a sign. So we had a list going. There was also a list that I looked at, like the Seward Register, and I thought, these are like some of our most important ones. They're on the National Register, they're on the Seward Register, they don't have a sign. Maybe we should be considering them as some of the most important ones. And if nobody had ever talked to them or we didn't get a response back, I personally contacted those people to ask them if they would be interested in sign, just because I thought they should be rising to the top. And so with that whole list of people left over before, people that I contacted, people that said they were interested, then I went through the scoring criteria that we ranked, we already voted to do, and then I made a list, which is on page 10. And so of those people, as I went through, there were some people that didn't get back to me, didn't respond. And so the ones that are in bold are the ones that actually said, yes, I would like a sign. And then this one just came up about the one on Second Avenue, which is where the site was of the original, down below the original Stucco Johnson house. That sign has been vandalized. It just kind of came up that the city is like, this is on a walking tour, but we did not do a sign for it. And so I've talked to the city, and they're interested in having a sign there and actually paying for the whole thing. We would just design it so that it goes along with all the rest of them. And so when you look at this list, there are 14 total, including that one I just mentioned. 13 of those would be ones that we would have to come up with funding for if we were to do them all. And I guess my recommendation is that we pick maybe 10. Yeah, if we really want to try to do them all, as long as people are interested, go for it, but try to narrow down to the top 10 or something like that and see if we can do those. Because the reason I say that, I know it's a lot of work, but at the same time, we have figured out a process from doing it last time. We know how to work with the sign designer, we kind of know how to go through the whole thing, so it will be in some ways easier than it was before, because we did 26 already, so we know how to do it now. So that's why I'm just saying that, I guess it depends on whether we could, what the timeline is, and if we think we can do it, and everyone helping, if we could do that many. But that would be my suggestion.
And the way that the thing works is, so applications due January 22nd, 2024, and then we would have basically the balance of the year.
How much is each sign?
So I've been trying to find out from Corvus Designs. The only information I have so far is to actually create the sign, work with the sign designer. It's $600 per sign, but that does not include the fabrication and the shipping. So what I would say, if we're going to be conservative and just make an estimate, is say $1,500 a sign, because we would have to get the hardware to put them all. I think they would all go in the ground and not be on buildings. And the shipping is not cheap either. So just estimate $1,500 per sign. I think that would be close.
I think that would be close as well.
And how long does it take to get these installed and manpower and everything else too? Because I mean, 26 signs already is a lot. So I'm trying to understand Tom's point and your.
It takes 2 months-ish to, once the sign is done and designed, to have it produced and then have it shipped. So I would say in 8 to 10 weeks after we're like, okay, this is final, and we've all agreed, that's how long it takes, because I'm doing one with Rotary Park, and I just finished that process. So it takes that much time to get it. We did a lot of back and forth last time, like we had so many people reviewing and just going back and forth to decide. It took a long time to do these signs and get them to the final stage. I think we could be quicker this time just because we're more practiced.
And how fast do we going to put this grant together? Does it go together pretty quickly?
The grant itself goes together very quickly, so it's about a 10-pager or so. A lot of it is just information on just the project names and so on. You have to be willing to comply with grant requirements and so on. You describe any previous HPF grants this project has received, which obviously we did receive one specifically for a walking tour. A brief introduction of the project, which in this particular case, I'm going to recommend that if we do this CLG, we only do it for the signs. We not get into design guidelines. I just don't think we're prepared to do that at this point. And then we would talk about the aim, the scope, and significance of the project to your community. We've already proven that by the existing walking tour. Preservation objectives, how does that help our CLG grant priorities? How does it relate to goals and objectives of the State Historic Preservation Plan? And how it's a priority in our community. What contractors we would use, what voluntary personnel we would have, and then we do a little bit of a budget. And we're basically going to cut and paste from the first walking tour thing that we did. So, I mean, I would be the one to do it because I did the first one. I may ask for some help for looking over it, making sure it's correct. I'd love for a volunteer, but we have till the 22nd, so we have 11 days. The only question that I have is if we do the CLG grant application before it goes in, is it going to need city council approval or just approval for receiving the funds once we're awarded? That's my question.
I don't know.
Because we don't accept a penny until we get
Yeah,
approval on
the-
anything anyways.
it's the-
It's just a,
It's the approval of the receiving of the funds that is the big hurdle. And I know with this most recent one, the application was submitted, but since these funds are going directly to the city to pay out to historic preservation, we would just have to do a resolution following the acceptance or the approval of the grant.
so do you think they were okay just to submit the grant?
Yes, as long as the recipient is ultimately the city of Seward.
It is the
Great.
city of Seward, yeah.
Yeah, so in the previous situation, it was the pass-through portion of the grant that was needed to be approval. But since this one is the case, we can apply for it and then do a resolution to accept the grant funds if and when the grant is approved.
Okay. So,
What I would suggest, just from, being involved in making this list, is that if you pick the top 10 ones that are bold, I would skip the Norway maple because that was the East Stokoe house that was torn down and rebuilt, so the house is no longer there. The house that's there now is new. They're already on the walking tour. I don't know if it's worth necessarily doing a sign and spending a lot of money for a tree. It's on the walking tour already. I think we could just reference it on the map, but not necessarily have a sign. So if we were to just go down and pick the bold ones and do 10, the last one on the list would be Erickson House, which is yours, the 1920. And we could, the Shoop House and Hawkbuster House on First Avenue could maybe be for the next round. We could include the one on Second Avenue, because the city would pay for all of it. It would just be requiring some time, and I've already kind of talked to them and talked to Carol Griswold, who originally designed the sign, got some information. I'm willing to just volunteer to do that one. The city would pay for it. So it's not something we would have to take out of the grant.
May I ask a follow-up question? The CLG grant funds require non-federal matching, correct?
they do, but the matching can come in form of volunteer hours, which is essentially what happened last time. There was very little funding. We did end up having some fundraising, which we're not going to do this time. But it's mostly can be done almost all volunteer hours. And all of us looking around the table can turn in volunteer hours, which is what we did last time. It covers most of the cost.
I would also be sure to include that additional sign that the city will be paying for in those, in that match. If we're doing a full robust sign upgrade or adding 10 more signs, and that second is part of that plan, include the payment that the city will be making for that in the matching grant funds, just so we can spread that out a little bit further.
That's good, and thank you for that. And I would clarify that I was incorrect, but I have the cover page for the grant, and it says, all projects to be completed by August 31st, 2025.
Great.
We have a long time, a long wheel to finish those 10 signs, if we were to do 10.
Okay.
Thought you were gonna say 2024, and then we'd be like,
No,
forget it.
I'll put my glasses back on, but it says 25. So I think that we're good. So we're in agreement that we should, and only stick to just the signs. I'm not ready at this point to do anything with design guidelines or anything. And if there is another grant opportunity that comes up in October or so, then we can certainly decide to do that then. But we'd be well on our way to getting this signage project done, which hopefully will get help from everyone around the table. So are we in agreement with presenting that at the next meeting? We get that done. The meeting following this.
And one thing that, I could do is do a presentation sometime to everybody on this group and be like, here's kind of the process that at least I went through last time of how to research the history and get the story. And then we could divide these things up and everybody takes some that they're interested in. and everyone would go off and do their thing and come back, and that's kind of what we did before, but a lot of times people are like, I had no clue how to find out. So now we know,
So,
and we can share that with each other.
so since we're gonna have an actual vote at the subsequent meeting, are we in agreement? Do we need to have a discussion of what you just presented as the signs?
My recommendation would be do them all because people are interested and want to, or if we're gonna limit it, do the 11, including one.
I would say 11 would be a nice number.
Okay.
Are you guys okay with that?
Well, and I was gonna say, I mean, I know you have 304 Second Avenue, and we also have 309, but we could delay 309 for a while. So if there's replace the sign and that's a cost, let's replace that sign.
So you're saying drop off 309, just do 10?
Yeah, but then and I'm unclear, sorry, if the, 1111 Second Avenue needs a replacement sign,
Yeah.
let's put that.
As far as those two we're dropping, or that I was recommending dropping off, I have visited 306 First Avenue,
Okay.
and to me, it seems like that has been extensively kind of redone, like, from the outside, I mean, it's kind of borderline. It's got some history and it's old, but I'm not sure it's the best representation, and I really have never looked at, except just from the outside, 303 Second Avenue, so I have no information really on it, except that she's interested. I asked her because it's an old building.
Right, okay.
So it's just not enough to really go on, like, would this be a good candidate? It might be worth a little more checking
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, I think, 304 is much more in line with the historic part of it, so, in my mind, than 309.
So you're prepared to present this next meeting those 10 first sign considerations, is that correct?
Yes, can do it.
Any discussion on that before we call this meeting? Because we accomplished everything we said we're going to with just a few minutes behind. All that. All right. Can I call the January 11th HP work session to an end at 7:07?